Good morning, good evening to everyone for joining us. If you are in Europe or if you're in Asia, thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Sebastian Lopez. I'm the founder and CEO of Jolt Digital. Very happy to be here with you today. Maybe a bit of a recap, and Amy, you can move to the second slide. A bit of a recap about the initiative that we launched last year called Learn with the Experts. So we launched it with two objectives in mind. The first one is to help people who were made redundant or people who are in between jobs. And the second objective is to transfer knowledge to brands, to clients who sometimes don't have opportunity to learn more what's happening in the industry. So today, I'm very pleased to welcome our expert, Amy Ward. She will talk about an important topic that is not talked so much about, which is how to make the most out of the agency-client relationships. So Amy will introduce herself very shortly, but I'm very pleased to have her on board. Also very pleased to see that Amy bounced back and got an amazing job now as a client. So we'll learn more about all your experience and how you find the client side, Amy, and tips you can give to clients on how to maximize a relationship. Again, this session is recorded, so you'll be able to find it on our website, and you'll find also all of the previous webinars on our website about CRM, about cookieless world, privacy data, organic social, etc. So don't hesitate to go there and to have a look, to learn more, to expand your knowledge. So thank you all for joining. I'll pass it to Amy now. Thank you.
Hello everyone, so it's lovely to meet you all. So I can't see any of your faces now, so if you do have any questions kind of along the way, please feel free to just shout out. But as Seb said, so today I'm going to be delving into the topic of how to get the most out of your agency client relationship. So before I jump in, I'll just quickly introduce myself and give a bit of background about where I've come from. So my name's Amy, and I've been working in the advertising industry for over 13 years now. And I've actually worked on all sides of the fence. So I started my career media owner side in sales, repping MediaCom. After a couple of years there, I decided to move agency side and actually moved over to MediaCom. And I spent 8 years there in both implementation and comms planning roles. I then moved over to Global into partnership management as head of partnerships and spent just under 2 years there. And then late last year, I took some time out of the workplace. So I've also got 2 young children, and I found the last few years quite full on. And I knew that I wasn't quite on the right career path, but didn't really have a lot of headspace. So I decided to take some time out was the best thing I could do to just reassess everything. So in that time, I also enrolled in a mini MBA in marketing with Mark Ritson. So it was something that I've been wanting to do for ages, but just didn't feel like I had the time. And then that's when I also came across this amazing initiative that Seb set up. And I think having that course and then things like these sessions were really valuable at that time because they helped me feel connected to the industry, and I learnt loads along the way, and it sort of inspired me and kind of gave me ideas on where I might like to go. So after a couple of months off, I started freelancing again at media agency side. And then earlier this year, I took a role client side where I'm now working as brand marketing manager at TUI. And funnily enough, the TUI's media agency and MediaCom. So I've sort of gone full circle with MediaCom. And as well as my career and being a mum, I've also spent a few years as Samaritan listening volunteer. And then I'm currently studying my level 2 CPCAB in breathwork. So I'd say that all of this has given me a unique skill set and perspective. I've worked on all sides of the fence, but they've all been centered around relationship and people management roles. And so today I'll share what I've learned over the years on how to get the most out of those relationships. So this is the agenda that I'll take you through. So I'll start with going through the dynamics between the agency and the client. So that's understanding each other's starting point and how it differs, and how knowing that will help understand each other better and then be able to kind of find those shared common goals and objectives. I'll then go into the importance of building trust and collaboration and some practical tips on how to build that. And then I'll then go on to how we can optimize performance. So by using each other's strengths and knowledge to then collaborate and create better work as a result. And then I'll go into navigating the unknowns, because inevitably things don't always go to plan and we can't predict every scenario. And I found these moments to actually be very defining for a relationship. And then finally, continuous feedback. So ensuring that there are the right processes and the right culture set up for open and honest continuous feedback so that the relationship can be improved and therefore business outcomes will be improved. And then any time for some questions at the end. So understanding the dynamics. So I think it's important to acknowledge that clients and agencies are not starting from the same point and they have different motivations and pressures. So the client works solely on their brand, which means they have a deep knowledge of their business and are driven by the brand success. The brand marketers will have KPIs based around generating ROIs from their marketing. And if they spend a lot of money on a campaign that fails, there is a genuine potential that they could get fired if they don't achieve their objectives. The agency works on multiple accounts and often across different sectors, and they will never have all the context of the client's business as they won't be privy to all the information and won't be in all the internal meetings. And even if they're invited to them, they wouldn't have time to attend them all. They are naturally driven by industry awards because it's through winning these awards that they attract new business. And winning awards usually means taking risks because it's doing something new. And unfortunately, more of that risk sits with the client. So agencies need to be thoughtful in how they navigate that. And ultimately, agencies need to make a profit from their services. So this means they'll want to charge for any extra services or resource and will be hesitant to take on any extra unpaid work. And lastly, this might seem a bit extreme, but they are unlikely to get fired if the client doesn't achieve their objectives. There's less skin in the game for them, and they are that much more removed from the client's business because paid media is one element of the marketing mix. So obviously every business and agency is set up slightly differently, but what all client internal departments have in common is that they're centered around the brand. So whilst you still might have siloed teams, there is a very clear common goal and they are all driven by the success of the brand and all have knowledge and expertise in the same sector and company. For agencies, the way that they're set up means that they need to work harder, not to become siloed. So similarly to clients, agencies all have their nuanced ways of structuring teams, and you'll find that they'll restructure from time to time to try and improve efficiencies. As an example, at MediaCom, we had a big restructure while I was there, where they moved everyone from different departments into business units, essentially mini agencies, as a way of trying to get all teams closer to the client. So on this slide is an example of a typical agency structure. So you'll have a client team who will own the relationship and the holistic response, and they will typically work on 1 to 3 clients. And of course, you could have a client team dedicated to one account. So it really depends on the size of the business. And the main objective for the client team is to keep the client happy. They're media neutral, and they'll be the most invested in the client's business. So to get a brief over the line, after holistic strategy has been agreed, client teams will brief the channel planners who will own the channel response. And they will be responsible for a channel strategy and plan and will typically work on a lot more clients than the client team. So as an example, when I worked in the client team, I worked on 2 accounts, one with a 25 mil spend and the other with a 3 mil spend. When I was a channel planner, I had about 16 accounts and 2 of those were significant spenders in my channel. And the main objective for the channel planners is to be the cheerleader for their channel and drive as much revenue into it. And they do still have direct contact with the client and they do have some client information, but they're naturally kind of less invested than the client team. Then the channel planners will send their plan to the buyers, who are the ones getting the plan over the line. So they're securing the best rates and quality that they can. And they typically can have even more clients than the channel planners, especially kind of the more senior that they get. And their objective is all about profit for the agency, as well as securing the best quality inventory. So their main focus is around things like the preferred suppliers list and ensuring any agreements with media owners are met. And naturally, this team are much more focused on their agency's success than the clients. and they also have the least amount of contact with the client and the least amount of knowledge. So that's the typical process of getting a campaign planned and booked. But then you also have all of these teams, and I've just listed a few as an example in this red box of all the other teams that feed into all of these throughout the plan cycle. And they all have their own objectives and motivations too. So you can see how easy it can be for an agency to become siloed, and how some teams are more invested and motivated by others in their client's business success. So siloed mentality is an issue because it leads to poor communication and difficulties achieving the long-term goals. And that's the same if it's between the agency and the client. So I've got, a funny example here, image here on a side of everyone kind of keeping each other in a pen. And if we do that, if we keep each other in these boxes and only share limited information, it's going to lead to a duplication of work, missed opportunities, and uninformed decisions being made. And this is a quote from a piece of research that was published in the Harvard Business Review. So communication patterns was the most important predictor of a team's success, more than any other factor, including personality, intelligence, and skills combined. So focusing on communication is the key when it comes to your client-agency relationship. And the fundamentals of clear communication is to set up clear service level agreements. They need to be put in place and established. And some points of contention that I found are things such as what's in and out of scope, what information is needed on a brief from a client, and then what level of quality of response is expected. Turnaround times are a big one, and then communication methods. And the point that I want to make here is that these agreements are often made at the top level and at the start of a contract, but they're not always filtered through to the day-to-day teams. So I would urge those decision makers to make sure that they cascade this information down to everybody who's working on the business, and then also set some time aside to review them because things become out of date quickly. So then, although agencies and clients aren't starting from the same point, they do need to find shared goals and objectives. And a quote that I think sums this up nicely is, alignment is not about agreeing on everything. It's about understanding each other's perspectives and working towards a common goal with respect and clarity. So finding shared goals and objectives is really important. So I've listed 3 things here that an agency could do to help uncover them. So the first one is interrogate the brief. So don't be afraid to challenge, but try to do it as promptly as possible. A client's aim is to get the best response to their brief. So if the agency needs clarification or has questions or any reservations, then that's perfectly okay. What would be annoying if it's not done in a timely manner. It should be done as upfront as possible rather than midway through a response. The second one is be genuinely curious about the client's wider business and industry. Share those interesting insights and thinking that you found from any reading that you've done or seen. And that includes outside of your direct expertise. So showing enthusiasm for a client's business is always going to be looked at favourably. And it might encourage the client to share more because they can see that you're interested too. And then the third one would be keep all internal teams updated on clients' business. So cascade that information, invite the wider teams to client meetings, and encourage that direct contact between those wider teams. So this is an important internal point for agencies. There are many departments involved, as we just kind of looked through. So it's the client team's job to share client information and try to bring those teams closer to the client. And as someone who has worked in implementation and the client teams, I did much better work when I was closer to the client, and I felt more accountable when I had more contact with them. So that's the agencies, and then there are 3 things that a client could do to help uncover them. So the first one I've listed here is bring agencies in early to a challenge before you have it figured out or have allocated budgets. If agencies are brought in further down the line, once a strategy has been agreed and budgets allocated, there's not there's like limited things that they could do to change it. So you're not fully utilizing their knowledge and expertise. But even if they don't bring a different perspective in, having them involved earlier in the journey will just give them that extra context and empathy to the challenge, and they'll be more invested. And the second one is share regular business updates and invite your agencies to sessions beyond what's directly related to the agency's remit. It's easy to think that the agency won't care or that it's not relevant, but providing that information and inviting them to sessions will make them feel like a partner. They'll be that much more invested, and you just never know what shared goal and objective you might uncover. And so I've got a couple of pictures here. So the top one is a picture of a Lucozade bottle, and it was something that I posted on Instagram in 2015. At the time, I was an outdoor implementation planner, and the Centauri client sent a bottle of Lucozade with a personalised note just before a big brief. It had such a positive impact on me that I posted it on Instagram, which, you know, I hardly ever post on social media, so it's a big thing for me. And then another example is when I was at MediaCom and I got invited to a Ribena taste testing. It was when the sugar tax was coming in, and so they had to change formula. Clearly, it didn't have a direct link to paid media, but it made me feel like a partner, and I absolutely loved working on the account, and I would have done better work as a result. So that was understanding the dynamics. And my next point is on building trust and collaboration. So trust is the most important thing in a relationship. We've all heard this phrase many times, and it's no different for an agency and a client relationship. So here is a great quote from Ernest Hemingway. The best way to find out if you can trust somebody is to trust them. And some stats from a research paper in applied behavioural science showed that companies with high trust levels outperform companies with low trust levels by 186%. So having trust within teams will increase profits. And three reasons that I've listed here are that, firstly, your parasympathetic nervous system is going to be activated more. So we have a sympathetic nervous system, which is your flight and fight response, and then your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and relax state. And how that shows up in your day-to-day relationship is that you turn up to your weekly agency client statuses relaxed and open rather than on guard with high cortisol and ready to attack. And some stats from that same paper are that it results in 74% less stress, 13% fewer sick days, and 29% more satisfaction in their lives. So that has to be a more pleasant way to work. It also saves time and energy. So if you turn up to your meetings and calls lacking trust, you're going to question everything. You're going to ask for changes, you're going to assume the worst, and you're going to be more cautious about what you're sharing. And again, some stats from that paper are that eliminating change requests can save up to 30% of time. You'll have 106% more energy at work and 40% less burnout if you trust your team. And then finally, it creates psychological safety. And again, some stats from that paper are that it creates 76% more engagement, 50% higher productivity, and you're more likely to take risks with innovation. So it's going to lead to honest feedback and more creative work. And then a great book on this, if you did want to kind of delve deeper into it, is from Patrick Lencioni on the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So teams who lack trust conceal weaknesses and mistakes, hesitate to ask for help, jump to conclusions about the intentions of others, hold grudges, and dread meetings. And so it means that taking risks, which is usually anything innovative, would be impossible to do. So this is an example of an award-winning campaign that I worked on with my favourite client, Centauri, when I was agency side. And we turned a Lucozade bottle into a free journey that you can use on the underground. So it might sound simple, but it cost a lot, both financially and in resource. And there were 8 different companies involved. So collaboration was paramount if we wanted it to be successful. So just to give some context, we had the media agency, the creative agency, the media owner, PR, activation, sampling, TFL, and the client. And in those challenging moments where it might not have gone ahead or things weren't looking great, we had no data to fall back on in terms of previous learnings or any predictions of success. So if there was a lack of trust between any of the stakeholders, it just simply wouldn't have gone ahead. So I've explained why trust is important. And when it comes to building trust, I really like this quote. You can't talk your way into trust, you have to behave your way into it. So actions need to meet words. And I think it's also just important to remember that we're all individual people. And so building relationships is key. You know, we all come with our own quirks, our motivations, preferred contact methods, working hours. So get to know each other as people and respect the individual wants or needs of that person. So remembering their birthday, or that you know that your day-to-day contact hates being cold called or is really responsible on WhatsApp. Acknowledging these little things is key to building that relationship. So 3 behaviours that agencies could do to build trust. The first one, actions need to meet words. So those little things really do matter. So you may think that some of these things that I'm about to say are really simple, but you'd be surprised how often they get missed. So join those calls on time, hit those deadlines that you've agreed, check formulas, spelling and formatting. Every time something's been misspelt or the wrong date's been written or you've joined a call late, it gives the impression that you don't care or you don't value the client, and it leads the client to question things such as, you know, if this is wrong, well, what else is, or can I trust what they've given me because I couldn't trust that? So yes, pay attention to the little details because they add up. And then the second one is provide clear and timely communication. So over communicating is better than under communicating. So I haven't been client side that long, but already I've had so many apologies from people agency side saying things like, you know, sorry to bother you, or sorry for lots of emails today. And I'm baffled by it because I don't feel annoyed by lots of contact if it's information that I need. But what is annoying is if there's a lack of response or not keeping me updated after an agreed deadline has been missed. And then the third one is be proactive with ideas and insights. And I've mentioned this point previously already, but it's just so key when it comes to trust and collaboration. I mean, even just the act of it will help build trust as it shows a genuine interest. But of course, it can also lead to better ideas and work. So then clients, so 3 things that clients can do to build trust. I mean, it's the same for agencies. So actions need to meet words. Constant iterations, budget changes and delays will take its toll on the agency. So while it's inevitable sometimes, they need to be minimised when they can and communicate often when it does need to happen, because ultimately too many changes are going to lead to a poorer quality work as the agency will start doubting if the work that they're producing will even be used. And then the second one is be open, honest and transparent. So go into the relationship with a positive attitude. And this is perhaps a personal view, but I believe that we should grant trust as a default starting point rather than waiting for them to prove it. The clients hired them to do a job, and so we should respect their expertise. And then the third one is avoid scope creep. So just be fair about what you're asking for. So this probably comes down to their SLAs that I mentioned earlier, and just ensuring that they're cascaded down so it's very clear what is in and out of scope. So that was building trust and collaboration. So my next point is on optimising performance. So agencies and clients both have a wealth of data that can be complementary. So agencies live and breathe media consumption. They've got access to third-party data from working across such a wide variety of clients and sectors. And from that, they've built up extensive research, insights, econometrics, and market trends. And then they've also got their own proprietary tools and technologies for things like attribution modelling or predictions. And then clients, on the other hand, are the absolute experts in their own business. So they've got their transactional data. They know their customers inside out, having done so much market analysis from focus groups and surveys and customer feedback. Many of them have their own first-party data from CRM, websites, location data like loyalty programs. So there's so much here. And if we fully utilise these opportunities, there's just no doubt that it would improve business outcomes. In my experience, these aren't utilised enough. I think that time is often the biggest barrier, but another barrier is trust, which we've obviously just discussed, and people being reluctant to share their data if there's a lack of trust amongst the teams. So this is an example of a campaign, again, from media agency side, and it was one that utilised data collaboratively between the agency and the client, and as a result led to a hugely successful campaign that won awards and went on to be hailed as, I think it was like the most successful campaign in a decade. So Maltesers wanted to champion inclusivity and pull out disability from that. And they were going down quite a serious route, as had always been done in advertising before, until an insight was uncovered from a collaborative piece of research between the agency and the client. And the insight was that actually advertising portrayed disability in a negative and overly serious light. So Mars recognised this as an opportunity and changed course. And it resulted in a humorous campaign around disability that challenged these stereotypes, and it created a more inclusive advertising campaign that resonated a lot better with the audience. When it comes to optimising performance, in my experience, we all start off with good intentions and we understand the best practices, and then things get busy and time just goes by. So my advice here is to just try and take a step back and allocate some thinking time to it. So 3 things that you could put forward today to optimise performance. So agencies should be putting forward strategies to A/B test something. When reporting, agencies should highlight metrics that align with short-term, but also having a plan that ladders up to long-term business objectives. Do an internal audit and showcase a tool or technology to the client. And these might be additional services, and you just know that the client won't spend any additional money. But I think it's still useful to present them, because it you never know what it could spark to the client, and it's still a learning opportunity for them to know what's available. And then for clients, clients need to advocate for a culture of continuous optimization through this iterative approach, and be open to experiments that fail. So try not to stay in the comfort zone, because in reality, it's not that safe anyway. Share as much data as you feel comfortable with. And again, this goes back to the trust point and why that's so important, and factor in budget for robust learnings. So that was optimising performance, and now I'll go to navigating the unknown. So we can't control everything that happens, but we can control how we respond. And shared adversity creates strong relationships. So when I look back at my career to date, these have been the defining moments for relationships. COVID is a big example of this. So for me, the March 2020 lockdown coincided with having recently been promoted and onto a new account, and then my boss going off on long-term sick leave. So I had to step up again. And then lockdown hit us. So I knew that I needed to make the client feel as comfortable as possible, and it really felt like a sink or swim moment. So I decided to view it as an opportunity to step up and take a proactive approach. So rather than waiting for the client to make a decision on what they wanted to do with their media, whether they want to cancel or amend it, I started to work on the various scenarios that we could look at. And then I also pulled together this piece of work around marketing in a recession, which at the time was the closest thing that we had to what COVID lockdown was. And as a result, client satisfaction scores went up versus the previous quarter, and we became stronger allies as they saw me as a partner rather than kind of waiting to be told what to do. And I think our relationship became better had COVID not happened. Another example that I worked on was moving on to the Merlin account, and it was just after the Alton Towers crash had happened. And I just remember the sadness and shock from the clients and these feelings of unease on next steps. And as the agency, we also didn't know how to approach it. And we therefore took a kind of business as usual approach. And in this instance, it wasn't the right approach. It was a missed opportunity to become a stronger ally. And the following years led to a distant relationship and ultimately parting ways. So 3 things that you could do here to apply that apply to both agency and client, but actually I think naturally skewed more towards the agency because the consequences are often greater for the client. So the first one would be turn the unforeseen, often difficult moments as an opportunity to be seen as a trusted ally. This means being proactive, having empathy, and making decisions based on if it were your money. The second one, clear expectations and SLAs are important. You know, I've mentioned previously the importance of SLAs so that bad practices don't creep in. But it's also important to recognise when these need to be thrown out the window. There are just moments when going above and beyond is what's needed to get something done. And I think the art is knowing when these moments are. And then the third one is proactively discuss strategies for identifying and addressing challenges before they escalate. So it doesn't have to be left until the unknown situation arises, and trying to predict those issues and challenges and being prepared with a backup plan will help smooth those over. And my final point today is on continuous improvement. So this has already been touched upon in some of the previous points, such as optimizing performance through A/B testing and trust through that kind of honest feedback. But I think it's worthy of mentioning as its own point. So don't forget to show regular appreciation and create an open dialogue to encourage honest feedback. So yeah, show regular appreciation, acknowledge the good work. And this is basically what I try to do with my children, which is acknowledge when they've done something good rather than overly focus on the negatives. And again, the little things do matter. So those little thank you emails or acknowledgement of an idea and a thank you for doing an extra replan or calling in a favour to get something live. Showing appreciation motivates people to want to work harder. And then set time aside to celebrate the wins together. So go for a meal together, get that face-to-face time in. It's in those moments that you're going to build the relationship and then ultimately the trust. And then the second thing is to normalize that two-way actionable feedback. I mean, feedback is really difficult for anybody to do. It's even more difficult for an agency to do because you don't want to give negative criticism to a client because they are paying you. I would say the onus is on the client to create a culture of asking for honest feedback. And in my experience, it's easier to do this if it's included regularly as part of the relationship. So this means quarterly at a minimum. And I'd also recommend specifically asking for a question on improvement as a standalone question rather than a vaguer one where it gives the opportunity for an agency to respond with all positive points. And then I'd recommend scheduling time to talk through. And I appreciate this sounds awkward, but it means that what will be written will be thought through, and then talking through it will help normalize it and easier in the long term. So that was my final point. So I'll just end with a bit of a summary. So 5 things to take away for this session. If you're going to take away anything, it would be 1, agencies and clients are not going to agree on everything. And that's okay, but finding common goals and objectives is key. You cannot talk your way into trust, you have to behave your way into it. So actions need to meet words. Do a data audit and find those mutual beneficial opportunities to maximise the data that everybody has. And then use those unknowns, those challenging times, those difficult moments as that opportunity to build trust and be seen as a true ally. And then what I've just touched upon just then, show regular appreciation for good work and normalise honest feedback. And that's it. Time for any questions.
Thanks, Amy. Great session. We got quite a few people on the call. So any questions before I jump into some of the questions I have on my end?
Might come out of this so I can see everybody again. Okay.
Cool. Maybe I'll start with one. So Amy, now you've been on both sides. Been on the client side, you've been on the agency side. What is the biggest challenge that you're dealing with right now, moving to the client side? Is it very different?
The biggest challenge? I would say the biggest challenge that I'm finding is that I think it's harder to take risks. So when I was agency side, I loved keeping up with the latest trends and the innovation. And when I heard, about the kind of the latest thing, I would be really keen to share that with the client. Say, we must try that. Moving client side, there is just that much more accountability, and you kind of see the wider context, and you've got a marketing budget, so it's scarier to take risks. So that's a challenge that I'm trying to work through, because I know that it's important to do, but I underestimated I can see why it's difficult for people to do that. So that's probably the biggest challenge that I found.
Cool, that's really interesting. And you mentioned that MediaCom is now your agency. So for any agency team who's coming in with a new client, are there any 2 or 3 things that you think like the first things you need to do to establish a relationship with a new client? Any advice or hot tips for agency people on the call?
Honestly, I think it's just the little things, like the basics. It's showing that enthusiasm and like coming in, kind of getting that meeting in. I think trying to build that a relationship, so establishing that contact, and then just showing a keenness to learn. So questions about the client's business. That's all you really want. You want an agency team to care about your business, to show an enthusiasm for it, and it is just those little things, because they seem like easy to do, and that most people do them, but it doesn't happen. Meetings get cancelled, or people don't join the calls on time, or they kind of don't value those weekly meetings that you have in. And I think just those little actions are gonna kind of add up to just show that you're kind of a team player, and that you have the time for the client. And I'd say.
Thanks a lot, Amy. That's very interesting. Adele here from Paris. During your time at MediaCom,
anything from the floor?
how do you reacted when the client?
Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me?
I didn't hear the last bit.
Yeah, sorry about that. How do you react when clients are sometimes asking for too much? When it's normal to go like beyond, sometimes like clients are very pushy and go like out of scope. How do you
that
react
is a
to that?
difficult one, but I think trying to get to the bottom of the challenge is the key there. So I think sometimes clients will ask for loads of stuff and loads of scenarios because they don't quite know what it is that they need. So I think taking the time to just have that conversation with the client and really try to understand what's the challenge behind what you're asking for, and is that an individual person challenge, or is that internal politics for the clients needing something, or is there this kind of broader kind of issue that they don't really know what the answer is, so they're just asking for a load of things. I think if you can try and get to the bottom of that, you won't need to do all of the work that they're asking for. So and I think that again comes down to having that good relationship where you feel comfortable enough to be able to, because it is kind of, it's not saying no, but you're challenging why they need it. Because so when I worked in both implementation and in the client team, and it would, when a client team just handed me work without having done the due diligence of asking the questions and really finding out why, then it just felt like I was being given a load of work. Whereas when you've really understood what, and sometimes it just is, there's just is more work, and but understanding that it's for an important reason, I think just helps everybody. So often I think if you challenge, then you'll find that they need something different from what they're asking for.
Thanks. That makes sense.
You spoke a bit about over communication and excuse me, and the need for that, and it totally makes sense. I just wanted to get your view on now that you're client side on like the type of communication, because I guess I've got a bit of a bugbear around email and lots of information going into emails without context, without explanation necessarily over phone, and I just wondered what, from the client side, your view on that is.
Yeah, and that is true. And when I say over communicating, it's more on information that I'd need rather than lots of selling, kind of upselling stuff, or and I think it's probably a personal preference in people's contact methods. Like some people just absolutely hate emails. Some people don't read emails, and actually a quick WhatsApp letting you know how the campaign's going is going to resonate more with the client. So it's probably working out what the client's preferred contact is. But I would, like, as a general rule of thumb, I think, so if a campaign if there are issues getting a campaign live, the client would rather get the updates on that. So this is what's happened. We're speaking to the media owner on this, or there's a tagging issue here. They would rather know that rather than this silence and then kind of getting the update that it's late. They want to know the kind of updates along the way. But in terms of how that's delivered, I think that's potentially a personal preference. But
makes sense.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the floor? If not, maybe just one last one from me, Amy, before we close the session. So now that you're on the other side of the fence, is the client side really much better? Is the grass really greener on that side? I
mean, for me, I've sort of by accident, I just find that I like to try different things. So, and I think that maybe it's just, I get a bit curious. I'm like, oh, how does it work on that side? But I'd say the most exciting part of it for me is just getting that holistic marketing plan. And I actually have an input into the creative, and I know what's happening with the other kind of parts of the marketing, rather than just seeing the paid media and not having kind of less say on what goes on in the creative. Obviously, you can share your opinion, but I think just seeing that it all kind of come together, and it means that I found that I'm more into the detail than I was agency side. So I think that's just because I have the wider context, so I can kind of make I can make assumptions on why something might have happened in a way that I just couldn't do agency side. So I think that I like it, but I'm still kind of new into it, and there's pros and cons on both sides. But there's scary parts of it, because there's just that much more accountability, and that, like I said, that kind of risk taking, where I thought I was this big risk taker and love the kind of innovation, I'm finding it harder to do. So I've got a bit more empathy for clients when I used to push it on them, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing it. It's just it's hard to do.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Amy. I'm mindful of time. If there's no questions from the floor, then I'd like to thank you. Thanks, Amy, for bringing us through a great session. I'm sure everyone learns a lot in the past 45 minutes, 50 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. Thanks for being so candid and sharing everything.
Right.